Welcome to the Page Turnerz podcast, where book lovers unite to celebrate the enchanting world of fiction. With your host, Paul A. Brooks. In each episode, we'll dive into the captivating realms of storytelling, exploring the pages that transport us to magical places and introduce us to unforgettable characters. In each episode, we'll embark on a creative expedition through the minds of seasoned and emerging writers to unravel the mysteries and unveil the passion that fuels their stories. Join us on this odyssey through the pages and pixels of imagination, where words become worlds and stories illuminate our lives. So, pour yourself a coffee and immerse yourself in discussions about writing, gripping plots, heroes and villains, and the sheer joy of escaping into a well-crafted story.
On today's show, I talk to Moriah Chavis, author of the young adult fantasy novel Heart of the Sea. As an unabashed lover of Harry Potter and Twilight, and just about any other fantasy as she puts it, we talk about her passion for writing, her stories, and of course her new work. Let me introduce you to Moriah Chavis. Hi Moriah, and thank you very much for coming on the show today. Now, you're a writer of short stories. And did you write those first before you wrote your novel Heart of the Sea?
So many of actually no. I actually started with novels first.
Okay.
Then about in 2020, like the end of 2021, I think that's when it was. I decided I was like, I want to write something. I want to get it published. And so I tried my hand at flash fiction, which if you've never done flash fiction, especially if you're wordy like me, is very, very hard.
Mm-hmm.
Flash fiction is only 1,000 words for anybody who doesn't know, and putting an entire story that has a beginning, middle, and end in 1,000 words is so hard because, like, I know I can just do like a few lines of dialogue and some description and some actions, and it'll end up being like 1,000 words. Because it's only like when you have it double spaced, it's only like 4 pages in a Word document, and so I did that. I tried my hand at a few flash fiction, and I got one accepted on this online magazine called Havoc. I don't know if you've ever heard of it before, but they put prompts out every quarter, and so then you can submit to the online magazine and based on their prompts. And so I did one of those, and I got it on their website. And then I started writing more short stories. I had tried short stories in the past, but short stories for me are very hard because, like I said, it's really hard to put a whole story in so few words. But I learned that short stories have helped me really learn how to say less, or learn how to say more with less, I should say.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I do like them now. I appreciate short stories and like the ability, especially people who write like fantastic short stories, the ability to put to develop a character, to give the character a whole story arc in just so few words. And so, and I think it's helped with my novel writing too, because novels seem so long, but you want to have so much in them because because it is a novel, you want to have good characterization, you want to have good scene setups and all those things. So, but I started writing HOTS in 2020, and I was querying it for a while, and then I queried it to Quill and Flame, which is the publishing house that it's through.
Yeah.
I think it was around April or so of 2022, or I think. And so, and then I had to revise and resubmit with them. And then after that, I did all my editing. They signed me on. And I started editing process and, all that. So different rounds of developmental, all those things. So, yeah.
Wow, fantastic. And so a very similar sort of journey, apart from the traditional publishing side of things, to myself, in as much that I started with short stories. And like you, I really struggle to get it in a condensed way. But as you say, it's really useful for you actually just to say what you need to say. Without trying to be wordy, which is I find always really, really hard. But so welcome to the podcast, and thank you so much for coming. It is really nice to speak to somebody else who has a similar sort of publishing background to me, which is great. And the way that you've been published, that's interesting as well. So we'll talk about that as we kind of go through, which is great. So tell us a little bit about yourself other than your writing, so we'll come back to that shortly. But do you write full time?
I don't. By day I work I'm a public school librarian at elementary school.
Wow.
And so it's like the end of our school year. So things are really crazy right now.
Yeah.
But so I have my master's in library and information science from the University of South Carolina, which is the ALA accredited, one of the ALA accredited universities in the United States. And so yeah, it was a great program. I absolutely every time someone wants to do their master's in library science, I always recommend the program I did. I think there's only a handful of ALA accredited, which is the American Library Association, universities in the US. And so I lived in South Carolina when I started my degree program. So obviously I had in-state tuition, but there's also, I know University of Southern California does one, University of Alabama. But the good thing about ALA accredited is I can work in a public library, I can work in a school library, I can work in an academic library. But my degree was focused on school library. So
Oh, wow. Mm. So are you working in a school library now?
yes, I work at elementary school level. So
Oh, nice. Okay.
that's like kindergarten, so 5-year-olds to fifth grade, which is like 11-year-olds.
Wow.
And then I teach pre-K too, so 4-year-olds.
So do you get a chance to influence them in terms of what they're reading?
Yeah, that's the best part. Because I've always, my degree was strictly in my education degree is strictly like librarian. But I was in the classroom a little bit last year because I had switched jobs and the school that I went to had a classroom position open. So I was in the classroom for a little while, and then the librarian actually retired at the school that I was at. So I moved back into the library. But what I like so much about the library is that I can like design my own curriculum. I can design my own lessons and stuff. Especially, I don't know if you know much about like the American education system, but it's very much they buy a lot of curriculum and they have to follow a certain thing based on the state standards and stuff.
Right.
And so I like the flexibility of being in the library and having that, the option, the ability to influence their love of reading rather than their ability to do it. Because my whole philosophy is you don't have to read on the grade level or the reading level that you're at, as long as it's a good story.
Yeah.
And also sharing stories with like the adult in your life or sharing stories with your friends. Like that's what creates like a love of reading, a passion for it, is the ability to share share
Exactly.
stories together.
Exactly. Wow, that's fantastic. It sounds like pretty much a dream job for a writer
Yeah.
then, really. Which
Yeah,
is
it's
so,
a great job.
yeah. So how do you find time to write yours? And if you're working full time?
I know it's very much, I write a lot at night. So my husband will have something on the television or he'll be doing something. I'll write on my phone, like when I have a free moment. I've gotten used to that. I didn't think I'd be someone who wrote on my phone, but I have the app they have the Google Docs app on my phone now. And so I write on it. So really just any free moment I have, because I'm not able to have so much of a schedule because I don't do it full time. So, or I do it kind of more in the moments between everything
Yeah.
else. So,
Yeah.
and a lot
Is
on
it,
the weekends.
yeah, well, I think we're now Saturday, so yeah, so and I've been editing and rewriting this morning as well. So you kind of just don't stop, do you? You have this, it's just this need to get the story out as sharp, and so it's nice and sharp and crisp and clean as possible. So it's kind of like, I suppose it's not like a job traditionally. It's just kind of in you that you're just trying to get out. So it doesn't really matter when or where you work. But what I find is interesting is you write on your phone. Somebody else I spoke to fairly recently does the same. I've tried, because I write on Google Docs as well. The main kind of my main manuscript is on Google Docs, but I can't do it on my phone. I mean, just it's not happening. So so I've got it here on this screen. So how do you find it writing on the phone? Are you kind of all fingers or are you all thumbs? I watch my daughter's thing and they're like,
I guess it's kind of like text messaging in a way. I use it. I write it on with my thumbs. And so usually I don't actually most of the time I don't start a story on my phone. I mean, every now and then I'll like start ideas on my phone, but I write on my iPad, I write on my laptop. So I write against all things. So that's why it's good for me to have an app that connects via the cloud. Because I do write in all kinds of different ways. And so I can just pull it up on my phone if I don't have my laptop or my iPad near me. And so it's very convenient, I think. And so And there's always like this, there for me, there's this mental thing of not being able to see my word count. And so a lot of the times when I am writing on like on my iPad or my phone, or even just in Google Docs, they don't, you have to actually like look to see your word count. And so a lot of the times it will help me versus if you're writing in Word, it's just like they're staring you in the face.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more, actually. I was going to ask you about your kind of writing routine in that sort of respect. So you don't work to a word count? I know some people, they got to get 2,000 words down. I can't do that. I actually just end up writing until I've had enough, if that
Mhm.
makes sense. Is that a similar way that you work, or do you have specific goals?
It depends on the story that I'm working on. So, like right now I'm working on something where I'm trying to get so many words per week. I'm doing a little slower. It's the first time that I've outlined something very extensively. And so I find it that I didn't like, because it's the first time I did it, I found that it's a lot harder for me to outline something because then I can like see the whole story in my head, but then I'm like, oh, you got to get it down. But I want to get it down so perfectly.
Yeah.
Um, I'm a very loose outliner most of the time. Like I always know the ending. Like I'm very good about, I know the beginning and I know the ending. The middle is always the hardest part for me. So I usually try to push myself through the middle, a lot. So right now I just have this goal of, I'm gonna try to get at least 500 words a day.
Wow.
And if I don't get 500 words a day, then the next day I can get 1,000, which doesn't sound like a lot, but I'm trying to make it very like crisp and clean. But
Yeah.
then I'm also working on something else like on the side that I'm just doing for fun. And those words are obviously coming like a lot faster because I just have a basic idea in my head.
Mm.
And so I'm definitely someone who appreciates the plantster, where I have the basic idea. I know how it's going to end, but not everything's outlined very specifically. So
That's fantastic. You're actually one of the first people I've spoken to who, I would say you're more on the plotter's end than the pantser end. You seem to be
okay.
up that end. For me, I'm way down here. I'm definitely a pantser. And actually, I found that it's interesting. You was talking about the ending of the story. I kind of know the ending of my story, but the way that I'm going to get to it has changed.
Mhm.
It's changed quite a bit, and I find that I've sometimes um, discovered a character that I've been writing that was literally just a bit part, if you like, has almost become a main character, so I can reach that end. So I'm very much a pantser in that
Mhm.
respect. Although I will do bullet points. If
Yeah.
I have some ideas of things that I need to include in a scene or a chapter, I'll have some bullet points in there. But that is as sort of plottery, if you like, as I get. I can't. I just can't. I'm not that
Mhm.
disciplined. I'm not that structured. I wish I was,
Yeah.
but I'm really not. I did try sort of last year, yeah. What were it, 20? Yeah, so last year, I suppose, or the year before, actually, before this first book was published, to write a specific 1,000 words a day. That was kind
Huh.
of what I had, and I did a spreadsheet. So I was trying to be very organized, but that went out the window within a few
Yeah.
weeks. I just couldn't do it. It was awful. Um, so your writing routine then really is, if you're trying to get sort of 500 words a day, did you say? That's pretty good if you can do that, I think,
Yeah. I know
consistent.
it doesn't sound like a lot, but like I said, with this particular story that I'm working on, I'm trying to make it very, I'm trying to make each word count.
Yeah.
And so I know, like for me, I don't know if my writing routine is very organized, because to me, every story I write is different. I like to use the comparison of when you're writing a book, you're just creating like a human body. And
Hmm.
then when I think about it that way, then every human is different. So you start with a skeleton, but everybody's skeleton is going to be different. You start with the muscular system, but everybody's muscular system is going to be different. But with a body and with also a book, you're adding all these elements that everything is going to be the same, but then they're also going to be unique.
Yeah.
So, you're going to have different characters. The characters are going to have different personalities. And like, I don't think writers also give themselves enough grace in this aspect of the fact that by writing a story from scratch, by creating this thing in your brain, you are creating a human in your mind, even though it's just in your mind. And humans are so unique, and they have the unique personalities, they have unique aspects of their physical appearance and everything. And it's all based on their past experiences. So you're creating an entire history
Mm.
of someone. And when you think of it that way, it's like, oh yeah, no wonder this is so hard.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you're writing and you're creating your characters, and you said earlier on that and I have to admit, I'm the same. I'm quite wordy.
Mhm.
How many drafts do you go through to kind of get it down? Do you have a set number, or do you just keep going till you think, right, that's good enough now?
I don't really have a set number. I'm very bad about keeping up with my drafts because I usually start with a document and then I edit it until I edit it to death, honestly. And so like I know this one thing that I am entering the querying trenches once more with it, which is the way to get an agent. I have worked on it for about a little bit like almost 2.5 years. I
Hmm.
started it January 2022 January 2022. I actually started it as a short story and then I sent it to one of my critique partners and she's like, you're not going to be able to finish this in just a short story. Like it's going to have to be very, very more complicated, very more, longer than a short story would
Yeah,
allow. And
yeah.
so I started it then. I kind of just put it to the side and then I started working on it more extensively in in 2023. So yeah, in 2023. And then in my head it was going to be 75,000, but by the time I finished it was 120. But then that's too long for YA fantasy. So I wanted to cut at least 30,000.
Yeah.
So I cut a character, I changed some scenes stuff, which was a very fast cut. And then I went through it and I tightened up my prose and everything. And so for that story, I focused a lot on the plot when I was getting the first draft down. And then all my editing went into characterizations and character arcs and character motivations and stuff,
Yeah.
which was really hard for me to find, especially for one of my characters. And so and then I ended up rewriting the beginning and reorganizing the structure of the book. And so it's less like building a house and more like building sandcastles where you're having to break apart pieces and then rebuild the structures.
Yeah.
And I think it was Shannon Hale that says, I'm shoveling sand into the box so I can build castles later. And
Yeah.
so you're writing books and
Yeah.
something like that. And so, I mean, I think that's very important to remember is that your first draft's not going to be great, but that's okay. My goal is always just to finish it because I can always edit something, but it's really hard to edit a blank page. So.
Absolutely. How do you feel about cutting out characters? And when you say when you've gone through a rewrite, you ditched a character almost.
Yeah.
How did that feel when you were doing that? Did it feel, because I don't know about you, but sometimes when I sit there, because I edit what I've written yesterday, so I go
Mhm.
back over it, and sometimes when I'm sitting there editing, I actually I find it quite overwhelming. That there's an
Mhm.
awful lot. It feels like there's an awful lot to do when I'm doing that. Now, I haven't had to cut characters. I've had characters that have become more than I thought they were going to be, but I've not actually cut one. How did that feel?
Well, when I was querying Heart of the Sea, I had feedback from people that were like, there's just too many characters.
Right.
And so I learned a few years ago that like you just have to like some characters just aren't necessary to a story.
Mhm.
And so I don't really have a problem deleting them anymore. I usually, well, especially with the story that I'm querying right now, I save their scenes. I don't delete their scenes entirely. Like I don't
Mhm.
just delete them. Like I save them in just like a throwaway folder with all my deleted scenes. Because for instance, with this one character that I deleted in my work in progress, I love her, but she just like for the vibe of the story that I'm writing for the plot of it, she is probably too relaxed and too whimsical of because it's not a very whimsical, it's more of a gothic YA book.
Mhm.
And so she reminds me, I don't know if you've seen Rings of Power, but she reminds me of the oh my gosh, the Hardfoot in Rings of Power, the main character.
Yeah.
She gave off that energy. And it's like my husband, he's a diehard Lord of the Rings fan. So he had problems with Rings of Power because he's like, they messed up the timeline. I'm like, it's fine. Like,
Yeah.
it's fine. Like if they didn't, I'm gonna be honest, I don't think most people would watch it because only the diehard fans would watch it.
Yeah.
She reminds me of that character. And so and so it was almost like she was like the comic relief, not necessarily because she was funny, but because she was more of a like a relaxed character. She was but also writing her, she was kind of insight into the world that I was creating.
Mhm.
But I found that especially with world building, your readers don't necessarily have to see every aspect of your world building. It's just that you have to understand it enough so that you can put it into so that you can add it into your story.
Yeah.
As long as you understand it, and then when you're writing it, it'll make it seem like it's effortless, even if you put all this, your blood, sweat, and tears into it. It'll make it feel effortless.
Yeah, very definitely. Now, you said earlier on that Heart of the Sea is it traditionally published? Would you say that it was traditionally published, or a hybrid, or how would you characterize it? And how did you go about doing it?
Yeah, so it's with a small press called Quill and Flame Publishers. So it's on the traditional aspect, as in they published it and then I get like royalties off of it.
Mm,
I do buy copies from like my publisher, for instance, at a reduced price.
yeah.
And then I can sell those. Or I'll sell them like online. I'll sell signed copies, and then I've gone to a few like book fairs, book events before, and I'll sell them that way. So it's traditional in the sense of like I have a publisher, and then and all those aspects of it. So yeah.
That's fantastic. Do they set any kind of deadlines for you, or do they how much influence do they have over the sort of final product?
So they set deadlines for my editing. So I had to have certain aspects of the editing done by certain times. I had to have my past pages done by certain times and things like that. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Do they do the cover design and all of that sort of stuff as well?
Yeah. So with a traditional publisher, they are in charge of the cover design and things like that.
That's really nice. So did you have a literary agent who approached them, or did you submit the manuscript to them yourself?
So with Quill and Flame, you don't have to have a literary agent, and I currently don't have a literary agent. I'm in the querying trenches for a literary
Yeah.
agent. But that is a whole other like aspect of writing that
Yeah.
is very exhausting.
Yeah.
But like literary agents can approach smaller presses too. I have some friends that have some stories coming out with smaller presses that do have literary agents. It just depends on, like I said, I think it depends on each book and where that book fits the best.
Yeah. How do you go about searching for a literary agent as you're querying at the moment? What have you done to look for them?
So I do a lot of research on agents that are what they're looking for. I'm using Query Tracker right now.
Okay.
Um, I've done I did an online pitch conference back in March where I pitched agents via Zoom or via Google Meets. And so and then they can request to read like so many pages or whatever based on your pitch. I've heard back from some of them, but I haven't heard back from all of them, so I'm still waiting to hear. So they can tell you yes or no. They can request more. And so yeah, it's a very slow process. So with
Yeah.
querying agents, you have to be very, very patient and understanding of the fact that yeah, to you, like and it is a whole mindset thing because, for instance, like I said, I've been working on the one that I'm querying for over 2 years. And so for me, it's like, wow, I've worked so hard on this, but then you have to think about you're sending an email. Like if I send an email today about it, this is the first time they're reading it.
Yeah.
And so it's like they haven't been part of that 2.5, year journey. So it is a definite practice and mind over matter.
Yeah, I would imagine. We were talking earlier before we sort of came on screen about for me particularly writing the blurb on the back cover for this.
Yeah.
I suppose you're writing a query blurb is something quite similar in as much that you're trying to condense your entire 75,000 word story into 3 or 4 paragraphs. Is that something that you sort of struggled with, or do you have a formula for that?
I do struggle with it. I think querying writing is a gift all in and of itself. Like some
Yeah.
people are just very good at writing queries.
Yeah.
They're very good at getting the agent's attention, and it is like with any kind of artistic field. I don't feel like most people wake up in the morning and they're like, I'm gonna write a book, and then they write a book and they're great at it. With
Yeah.
any like it's with any kind of art, with drawing, with painting, with writing, you're using some kind of muscle. It might be your hands if you're doing portraits, but or it's in general, it's your brain, because you're having to teach your brain how to move your hands in a certain way. With art, with writing, you're having to teach your brain how to string words together in a specific way so that you can find your voice. And that's not something that you just wake up and are able to do. That's something that takes practice and it takes discipline. And so, yeah, I feel like with art, especially, it's really hard for people to see that, what you don't, there's a lot that you don't see in the background with any kind of art. There's the time that you don't see. There's the time you don't see, and how long it takes somebody to create a manuscript, or how long it takes somebody to do a portrait. And so also, like, I know I was watching, or I was on, it might have been Instagram, and there was this photographer who said he had planned 2.5 years to capture a photo at the eclipse from the other day.
Right.
Like, he did research on where he needed to be in order to, be able to capture, because he wanted to get a very specific photo. He wanted to get the eclipse at totality with a bird in the shot. And so he had to find a place that has birds flying overhead with totality. And he did all this research, and I was like, that's just, and then people, of course, there's always going to be trolls on the internet commenting about, like, how, I think somebody was like, don't tell me you spent 2.5 years planning this and you didn't even use a tripod. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, the photo was amazing. So somebody's going to have something to say about it.
Yeah.
So, like, we're not seeing the amount of preparation he put in to get one shot. He had 3.5 minutes, during this totality. And that's just like, it's crazy.
Yeah.
And so and with querying agents too, especially with query letters, you have about 13 seconds to capture their attention. Because I think I read online that the average time that people will spend reading an email is like 9 seconds. You have anywhere from 9 to 13 seconds. And so, like, that's really hard when you think about it that way. Like, you put 2.5 years into something, and then you have 13 seconds to grab their attention. And so it's writing queries is definitely an art form. And so I actually rewrote my query yesterday. And so I'm going to send that out and, like, test it, because you're just testing the waters. You're seeing, it's kind of like throwing chum into the water and seeing which sharks appear. So, so yeah.
So let me just write down, literary agents are sharks. Let me just put that.
They're not sharks. They are people. And I think sometimes it's really hard to remember that too. Is because, and I think there was a big shift in traditional publishing after COVID. And so it made things a lot more difficult. And so, like, that's another reason that I chose to do an in-person / virtual writing conference last month, is because I wanted to present my story to these people in person, because there is a disconnect when it's over technology. And so I wanted to be like, you're a person, I'm a person, here's my story. And so, and literally, like, conferences like that do cost money. And so, of course, not everyone's able to do that. And there is the slush pile, but the slush pile, it's hard to get out of the slush pile. But people do it. But that is one thing that I wanted to invest in, was being able to, not see them, as sharks, or not see them as just a face, like a invisible, like a masked face behind a screen. And so even if it doesn't end up coming to, like, finding an agent that way, it's definitely a practice in how to present your story in a way that gets people's attention. Because when you do publish it, even if you choose to self-publish it, you're going to have, even if you're, like, pitching it to people in person, like you set up at a festival or something, you only have a few seconds to grab somebody's attention, especially in today's world, because technology and social media has made people's attention spans even shorter. You have a sentence really to get the attention.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think people, readers particularly, they pick up a book in a bookstore, or they have a look on Amazon, and they'll read a little bit of the synopsis, maybe just the first couple of sentences or something like that. They don't appreciate how much work has gone in, as you said, behind the scenes. There's an awful lot that goes into it, in terms of writing it, rewriting it, editing it, all the forms of editing that goes through, the design, the formatting, etc., etc. Before this book comes out, and they've looked at it and they're going, oh yeah, that's quite good. Quite good after 2.5 years. The work is a little bit.
I know. When it comes to like reading books, like, on a personal, like just for enjoyment level, I am probably one of the friendliest reviewers you're ever going to get, because I'm like, this took somebody a long time.
Yeah.
Like, even if I didn't enjoy the book, I'm going to find something positive to say about it. Because I know last year I read, or it was actually an audiobook. I listened to this one audiobook, and I'm gonna be honest, I did not like the plot. I did not like the main, like I didn't really connect with the main character. It just wasn't, I knew reading it, listening to it, I'm like, I am not the audience for this book, but the author can write. She was a very good writer. And
Yeah.
when I wrote my review, I was like, I am not the audience for this book. I did not enjoy it, but the writing was spectacular. Like, she's a good writer. Like, she obviously did. Like, but it's just, I wasn't the intended audience for it. And that's okay, because it's art and it's subjective. And so not everybody is going to be the intended audience for it. But I do like to find something positive to say, because it is a, it's an art form. It's something that's coming from somebody's most vulnerable place, I feel like. And I'm a very big supporter of like small businesses because of that. Like, I want to support small businesses, even though it does cost a little bit more money, because, that's somebody who's doing something by hand. It's a craft, or it's a trade that they have taught themselves or they've studied. And so I just find it very important also to encourage people who do small business pursuits and things like that, because I have seen from my side of things, writing books, how much effort goes into that. So I know that even if someone's making something that has no connection to literary things, like, soap or, shampoo bars or something like that, I'm like, that is the thing that they put their passion into. They had to learn that. They had to, get that skill. They invested money into it so they could get the right products to do it. And I feel like whenever you do something, whether or not it's writing or whether it's not, it's some kind of craft, whenever you do it and you see how much investment in time and money you have to put into it, then it also gives you a different perspective for people who do something like that, who do small businesses. So, yeah.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So, in terms of your reading there, because I mean, like you, I read quite a lot, and I am actually trying to expand into different genres. And you sort of mentioned a moment ago about the fact that, the book that you just read might not be your thing. So I'm trying to, for that very reason that you were saying, there are lots of and tons of really good writers out there that we can all learn from. So I've tried to sort of expand the genres that I'm reading into. Are you doing the same, or do you stick to YA fantasy?
Oh, I read all kinds of things. Actually, I'm reading one YA fantasy right now, More Than Life by Brittany Finger. It came from Wise Wolf Books. It just came out, I think, in January. I'm reading that. That's a YA fantasy, historical fantasy. But I'm listening to crime fiction. I'm listening to the Robert Galbraith, which is J.K. Rowling's pseudonym. I'm re-listening to the C.B. Strike books. I don't know if you've read those, but they are very good. And I love Harry Potter, but J.K. Rowling's adult books, they are masterpieces. Like, she is, if you want to learn how to write good characterization and characters that people care about, I mean, Harry Potter is a masterpiece in and of itself as well. And there's a reason that people read them from the age of 5 to 50. And so she is just so good at that. And she is just so talented at being able to create characters that feel real. And so listening to her books and rereading her books, I feel like it's a very good practice in how to do the same thing. And like, even if I'm reading it for enjoyment, I find myself like, oh, so that, like, I'll just be like making notes about how, like, she does these little things in her books that just make it so unique to her voice, but also, creating characters that feel like they could just step right off the page. And that's what I find is so important about reading outside of just the genre that you write. Like, it's very important to read inside the genre that you like, so you can follow the trends, you can see what things readers are looking for, but also reading outside of it, because trends are very good, but a good book is going to be a good book no matter what year it was written.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
It's really interesting that you said that you keep your notes about the characters that you've cut that don't make it into your book, because J.K. Rowling did something very similar, didn't she, with the characters? And she's got, I don't know if you've seen the interviews of her about how she wrote Harry Potter, and you probably have, but for those that haven't out there or listening to this, she has got boxes and boxes of stuff about characters, places, times, seasons, all sorts. She knows the absolute ins and outs of the entire life history of all of her characters. And I think that makes such a difference as well, because, you know, it allows you to um, uh, pour this character out onto the page, knowing where this character has come from. And people, I think, pick up on that. They can pick up on the history of it without needing to know it. And I think that's something that is so good.
Yeah, for instance, with the strike novels, there's a show too. If you this, I think Cinemax has a show too, CB Strike. But like, I'm re-listening to them. There's 7 books out right now. There's the 8th one's coming out sometime this year, and there's going to be 10. And I was just thinking the other day, I was like, oh my gosh, how does she plan 10 books in advance? But then I got to thinking, I was like, when we meet Strike, who's our main character, we find out little things about him, but like I'm in book 3 and there's like this major like character development thing that I'm just now learning about Robin, who's like his assistant, who's also the female main character. And it's like being as I've read them before, you know, hindsight's very 2020, so you can see these things beforehand. But I'm like, she makes references to this traumatic event that happened in Robin's life in book 1, but she doesn't tell you about the traumatic event until book 3, because because it becomes so valuable in book 3 that this thing has happened.
Yeah.
It becomes a very intricate part of the plot. And I'm like, she had to have like pages and pages and pages of notes on just this, like on these characters. And I think that's the true test and how to like make them real and how to make them stretch out for like 10 books, is because she's only giving you a little bit about each character throughout it. So it really is like you're meeting the person from day one and then you're becoming friends with them. And that's just, yeah, it's unique, and she's very good at it.
Yeah, but it's also something that I think, you know, that when someone says to you, so what's your book about? When you've got that much detail and that much information that you've created from there, just condensing it down into one sentence and explaining what your book about, what your book's about, is really hard.
It
You know,
is, yeah.
something that's really easy to do. So, you know, it's good that she can do that. And it's actually one of the things that, you know, like you were saying earlier on about writing a query letter, is an art form on its own. It's trying to get that right so that, you know, somebody who's reading that back blurb or the query letter is interested enough to want to read the next sentence and all the way down. That's really hard to do. Well, listen, we talked about J.K. Rowling quite a bit.
Yes.
Let's talk about your books. You know, she's great, but let's talk about yours books. I'm going to I'd like you to talk about your book, Heart of the Sea. So talk about that. And do you want to talk about your short stories first, or as well as, or whichever
either one is fine.
Like.
Either one's fine. I can talk about Heart of the Sea first.
Yeah.
Heart of the Sea is a young adult fantasy about a girl whose sister has gone missing. She's been taken by this darkness that's been trying to take over the 5 kingdoms. And so her goal is to rescue her before it's too late, before the time has run out, before they've both reached a certain age where she can no longer be helped anymore, because she's locked into this decision making. And so it was based on the fact that she's not an adult when she makes this decision, and once she becomes an adult, like the decision she's made has been locked in. It's going to be much harder to save her after that. And so she has to steal a pirate ship in order to do so, because she's without a ship, but she needs to go across the ocean. And so she's going to steal the fastest ship in the kingdoms, and the guy who captains it is the queen's right-hand man. And it's been ordered that if he wants to become free, he's going to have to kill Nerissa in order for his freedom.
Yeah. So you're talking about, his name's Cyrus Crowe, isn't it? He's the captain of the Red Dawn.
Yes.
So thinking about Nerissa then, first of all, is she based on anybody that you know, or did you, I mean, again, one of the worst questions you can ask a writer is, where did you get that idea from? Did you, I mean, for me, when I'm writing something, most of it comes in just kind of a daydream, or I maybe have seen something on the TV and it's just sparked something and then I'm off. Where did Nerissa come from?
So it was during COVID. My husband, he was my boyfriend at the time, and I were watching all these movie series. One of them was Pirates of the Caribbean, and I was like, it'd be really fun if Elizabeth had like more family. Like, she's got her dad, but like, what if she had a sister? What if she had gone through even more loss? And what if there was a little bit more magic and she had a lot of internal conflict to fight as well. Because Nerissa she has this anger that she's been living with for a few years. She has these powers that she has no idea how to control, and then there's anger associated with that because her mother didn't teach her how to use her powers. And so she was inspired by the Pirates of the Caribbean trilogy by Elizabeth Swann, definitely, but also just I think she speaks to people because there's always, especially with teenagers. I've had a lot of like middle schoolers read my book and they really liked it because she is in this really precarious position where she's having to make a lot of decisions, especially adult decisions, because she's on the precipice of adulthood. And that's just new for her. That's difficult. It's something that everybody goes through. And I think that's also important when you're designing characters, that no matter if it's a fantasy landscape, a science fiction landscape, is that they have these basic human experiences. Because that's what makes us love books, is finding something that we can all connect with. And so, that's where, finding a way for her to, even though she's in a magical world, she still has these very realistic problems.
Well, she's instantly relatable, isn't she? I mean, for the age group that you're targeting, as you said, they're going through that period between that transition from childhood to adulthood, and if they're in that, if you're writing in that sort of arena, if you like, that they become instantly relatable, which is great. Cyrus, though, how did you describe him? Handsome as he is dangerous, I think was one of the sentences in there. When you write Cyrus, and I'll ask you about Nerissa as well. Do you see him in your head? How does Cyrus appear to you?
For me, Cyrus I feel like he was somebody who was yanked from a place of privilege and put into a place of like, he's basically become a slave to this queen, whereas he was born into privilege, but then he's yanked from it. And he also is forced to grow up really fast. He has a cousin, Bessie, that is in the book too, and he feels very protective of her. He feels very responsible for her. So he's definitely got older sibling traits because he feels like he feels like he has to be in control. He has to be the one who is, fixing things, and that he is solely responsible for, making sure that they end up safe and on the other side of things. And so he's very strong-willed, and so is Nerissa. So that obviously creates instant tension between them because they both have strong opinions and they both want to share them. And so it does create this problem where they end up having to work together, but because they have to work together, they're also going to have to get along. And so,
that comes across really early, actually, that tension between the two of them. I mean, really, from the first couple of pages, Nerissa's in with the witch. She's told what she needs to do, and then all of a sudden they're battling on the quarterdeck on this ship.
I know. People have told me, like my friend Amanda who read it, she's like, I didn't realize like she was going to steal the ship in like chapter 1. I was like, yeah, it's pretty fast.
Absolutely, it's great. I mean, it makes you read it. It makes you want to read the next bit, which is it's a page turner, which is great. It really is. It's really good fun to read. So that's of course that's exactly what you want. You want people to read more of that. Then now that book is published as well, isn't it? Who's publishing that? Is that
that's Quill? That one's with Quill and Flame. Yeah,
it is with Quill and Flame. Okay, that's good. So talk about your short stories then as well. So they come after this book.
After, in between, kind of at the same time. I'm always working on something. And I think starting with short stories and writing short stories, especially editing, because I was editing Heart of the Sea, because one of the feedback that I got when I was querying Heart of the Sea is that it started too slow, and so I actually deleted about 50 pages from the beginning.
Right.
And I shifted.
It's definitely not slow now.
I know. I shifted some of how things started, how things were set up. And it works better. And I think by writing short stories, I kind of taught myself how to start in media res, in the middle of the action. And that's something I am not good at. Like, writing action scenes is not something that comes naturally to me. Like, some people, it comes very naturally to them. They can write a fight scene very easily. I am someone who edits my fight scenes very extensively, because I'm like, it's got to like, because I have to be able to map it out in my head. And then once I map it out, I have to change it so that it's not very telly, it's more showy. And
Yeah.
so, but yeah, so short stories have helped with that because like I said, every word counts in a short story.
Mm.
Because with a short story, like with a novel, especially with YA, you really can't go over 100,000 words, especially if you're new to publishing or
Sure.
new to having things published. But with short stories, you have even shorter of a word count. Like some, especially I've seen some call for submissions where they're like, don't go over 5,000 words, and
Mm.
that sounds like a lot, but it's really not. Like
No, no.
I'm working on something just for fun right now, just as like like a brain cleanse. And I've only worked on it for like, I think 1 or 2 days, and just, sitting down to get some words down. I haven't even finished the opening scene and I'm almost at like 2,000 words because I'm like putting all this in and I'm like, oh my gosh. And then I am giving myself like, I want it to be just like more novella length when I finish it. And so I'm like, well, you're going to have to get to 12,000 by this part. And so by 15,000 by here. And so for me, though, it is hard to think in word counts. And so I think short story writing has helped me learn how to think in word counts.
No, that's really good, because I think
But
really the reality of it is a story is as long as it needs to be, isn't it?
mhm.
I think that's the long and the short of it. I mean, Stephen King said the difference between in terms of reducing the word count in the edits, the difference between draft one and draft two. Draft two is draft one minus 10%. I think
Yeah.
that's kind of roughly what he said. Would you agree with that?
Oh yeah, I think so. Like I said, when the thing that I'm querying now ended up when I after the first draft was probably around, I don't really truly know what the first draft was because I had some feedback on it before I was quite finished with it, I wasn't quite finished with it. And it was a mentor that I was working with, and she's like, I think you need to start it in a different place. And so I went back to the beginning and added the whole like beginning, re-edited the beginning, changed some things, it lengthened the beginning. And once I had done that, it was around 120,000. And I'm like, this is just way too long. Like it needs to be split in half and lengthened even more, or I need to look at it and really consider, like if I'm getting the whole story down in a very precise way, then I need to think in terms of if I can get my story across without breaking it into two pieces, then I need to just delete. And that's really hard to do,
Yeah.
especially because after you've written the story, you kind of know the things that can't be taken out. And so then you have to look at the things that can be taken out. And that in of itself is a hard thing to do. And like Hots was not my first book that I written. It was my 7th. And like this one is the one that I'm querying now is like my 9th. And
Wow.
so, and I wrote one between it that we won't talk about because it was terrible. But like, but I like to tell people, like I have a writer friend, she's like, it just amazes me that you have all these things shelved that you never published. I'm like, I do, but I don't want them to be published because some of them just aren't that good. And they've also just taught me things about my writing. They taught me things about my voice. I'm not saying that I'll never go back to those stories, but I'm a different person than I was when I wrote those
Yeah.
stories. And I
Yeah.
might be able to tell them in a better way now. It's just, I had to get them out at that point. But if I go back to them, the story's gonna be different. The characters are gonna be different because they have been, even though they've, been in their little corner of my laptop, they've still been living rent free in my brain, if you
Yeah.
will.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, you've got some fresh stories, I'm assuming then, sort of bubbling away back here
Yeah.
somewhere, ready to
Yeah.
come out.
It's a blessing and a curse. I love having all these ideas, but also because I have so many ideas, I don't know what to focus on sometimes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And so, but yeah, it is.
yeah.
And that's another thing that's been fun for me with short stories and novellas, because I have a novella coming out next year in a anthology. It's fun just to be able to like explore these characters that don't necessarily need a whole novel to tell their story, but
Mm.
then also get them out of your mind.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, very much so.
mhm.
Now you mentioned earlier on you like to listen to audiobooks as well.
I'm a big
Um,
audio person.
yeah. Are there any plans to have Heart of the Sea narrated?
Yes, the male narrator has finished and the female narrator is working on her part. So it should be
Wow.
hopefully to sometime this year.
Yeah. How much input have you had in that? I mean, I've spoken to people who have sort of had it and done it before, and their books out on they're available as audiobooks. How much information influence have you had on making sure that it is how you? It's not this is how you hear the book.
Yeah. I
Their
don't know.
characterization.
I don't know if I'll ever hear somebody who sounds like Narissa and Cyrus, like ever. I don't know if that person exists,
Yeah.
but I think the narrators have done a really good job of capturing them. So with the narrators, the male narrator and the female narrator is part of the email chain, but the male narrator, he started first. So he would email me and then he asked for like where the characters are from, what's their dialect, what's their accent like. Because I have like one character, she never uses consonants. So she has a very specific accent. She's from an area that was based off the islands near France. And so she has a very specific dialect.
Mm.
And so like that was very important. And then apparently I have some weird pronunciations of names, which I'm not surprised. Because a lot of the words I created myself. And so the narrators were both making sure they said the words right. And then they've sent me some. I've listened to all the male parts because like I said, he's finished it. I listened to all of them and it was very surreal to be able to listen to them and be like, oh my gosh, it's like a whole story. And so that was a lot of fun too. But just hearing it come from like my brain to the page was already amazing. But then from the page to somebody else's narration was otherworldly. So yeah.
Yeah. Fantastic. So you are like J.K. Rowling, really. You do know the ins and outs and backstory of all of your characters.
I don't know if I'm like her. I would love to be able to be as good of a writer as she is, but she's definitely amazing.
Yeah, well, it's just you just got to keep doing it, isn't it? That's the thing.
Yeah.
As you were saying, with some of the novels that you've written and some of the work that you've done in the past, you look back at it and you think that's terrible. But I'm sure at some point you'll come along and you go, actually, that might have some legs further on down the line that you can work with.
Stealing, like I have this one thing that I don't even really want to rewrite, but I kind of took some of the elements from it and put it in the story that I just finished that I'm querying. And so I don't think I would be able to edit it enough so that it would be different enough, but I did take elements that I had worked on. And part of me is like, if I hadn't strengthened those elements when I was writing that story, then they wouldn't have been as strong when I started writing this other one, because I had already explored them for like a year and a half, even if it's a different story with different characters. It's just I had already kind of set the basis of the idea, and so that was very important too. It's okay to see ideas from yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So the audiobooks, when are they going to be completed and ready to come out?
I'm not 100% sure. I have to speak to my publisher about it, but I'm hoping around the time that Hots is a year old, which would be in August. So that's my hope.
Yeah. So have Quill and Flame had much influence on that sort of audiobook process?
Yeah, so since they're publishing the audiobook too, they're the ones who are like contacting the narrators. Like I said, the narrators have sent me like pages so that I can listen to it. Which is very good because like at first the male narrator had said one of the names wrong and he's like, oh my gosh, I'll have to go and fix that. But the fact that he was like, I'm just gonna do one part and then I'm gonna send it to you. And I was like, that's fine. And so yeah, it's fun though. And I think I can't speak for my other traditionally published friends, but I know like they do have some say. I know one friend of mine who had her audiobook, she was able to like ask for feedback from her followers on which voice they liked best.
Oh wow.
The publisher wanted the feedback from her followers on Instagram, and so that's a lot of fun too.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that'd be really, I'm really looking forward to hearing that. So you must let us know when it comes out for sure. That would be really good. Now you have an Etsy store as well, don't you?
Yeah, I don't use it as much. I've been using it more for my for selling my books. But
yeah, because you people can buy signed copies from Etsy. Is that right? Yeah.
I don't have any listed right now. Right now I'm out. I need to order some more, but yes, they can. And I've been selling some on my Instagram too. And so sometimes every now and then I'll put in my stories like I have 5 copies if anybody wants to claim it. And so
yeah. So do you have any plans to do any other kind of merchandising? I mean, some people, they do bookmarks and stickers and things like that. I mean, I've done some stickers, but have you got plans for yourself?
Yeah, usually when people buy from me, they buy the signed copies, they get free merch with it. So I have stickers, I have some magnets, I have bookmarks, stuff like that. So
Wow, fantastic. So all of this, all the information is stuck in a box somewhere, one of the many boxes, I'm sure, with all your other ideas and et cetera, et cetera. So when you're thinking about and your ideas pop into your head, what do you do with them? Do you just note them down somewhere or I mean, I've got 2 notebooks here and I've got the board behind me and all that sort of stuff. So I write a lot of ideas down, but actually very few of them make it into make the cut, if you like, into the book. What do you do with your ideas when you're writing?
I know I have documents. I like documents where I can just go look at. I used it when I was writing the thing I'm querying right now. I especially because it's just fresh in my brain because I've been doing it so much. I had a document that I would just. It was a running document, so it started out as like. Usually, I will start with like, okay, I'm going to write down my blurb for. Of I haven't written the book, but if it's an idea that I really want to explore, I'll write down the blurb,
Mhm.
and then I'll change that blurb as the book's changed. I'll do like the basic 3-act structure. I'll write down character motivations. In this document, I ended up going chapter by chapter, writing down a sentence for each chapter. And so it's kind of just a running document on all the world building stuff. So yeah.
Wow, fantastic. So, what are you working on now, specifically writing wise?
Writing wise, I have a mystery book that I'm working on that's coming out with another small press sometime in 2025.
Okay,
And so I'm working on it. And then I'm working on another project just for some fun. And then I should be starting edits on a Snow White inspired novella sometime this April, and I'll be starting on the edits for that. That's going to be in an anthology from 20 Hills 20 Hills Press sometime in 2025.
nice, really nice. How do you go about editing? I mean, for me, I will, as I said earlier on, I will go back and edit
Mhm.
quite hard actually what I've written the following, and often I end up rewriting quite a bit. Do you do the same sort of thing, or do you leave a period of time and then go back to it to have a look at it before you edit?
I should leave a period of time because I feel like it would be more successful, but I usually don't.
Yeah.
So, but I am trying with because I've been a little creatively stuck the past few weeks. I've had a lot going on, a lot of things, a lot of life events. And so I actually was messaging my publisher yesterday, and she's like, I feel like you should probably just take a break. Like it's fine if you're behind on your deadline, but we want the book to be really good. So it's
Yeah,
okay to
of
need
course.
like a few days. And I'm like, thank you, like close to tears, because I'm like, I needed somebody to tell me that. So
Yeah, yeah. I think because I think as you know, as a writer, you do put a lot of pressure on yourself, as you said earlier on, that you want to make it something crisp and clean first
mhm,
time as best you can. And I'm sort of saying I like it to be, I like the prose to be quite tight. I like it to almost sing, if you like, so that it is very easy to read, that the story's coming across quite nicely. And I think that's why, I too tend to edit quite hard, but like you, I don't leave much of a gap. 24 hours is not really a gap at all, is really.
I know.
But I don't leave that much. But then before you would submit your edited manuscript, do you expect them to come back with a lot of stuff to edit again?
Mhm. Yeah. So I love, well, I think my first drafts a lot of the times are just trying to find my story, but I'm very
Yeah,
hard with second drafts. Like I
yeah,
really want those to be very clean and very crisp. And that's hard to do, especially
mm,
because like I said, you just have a bunch of sand and now you're trying to make sandcastles, or you
yeah,
just have a skeleton of a body, but you're trying to make a whole human. But there are so many steps to that. And so it is a lot of, I had to I had to force myself to take a step back, take a breather. The 20 Hills who I'm working on with this mystery book, they're very good with edits because I've worked with them a good bit on my short stories. And so I I think the best advice that I could give any writer is to be very flexible in when other people give you their feedback, because most of the time people are giving you their feedback to help you, not to hurt you.
yeah,
And so I have learned through the about decade that I've been seriously like taking writing very seriously, that feedback is so valuable. And like I even made the comment to one of the writer group chats I'm part of. I was like, I want somebody to tear my thing apart because I know I want them to make it better. And if
yeah,
they feel like they can make it better, then I don't care how red the page looks. Like I want them to tear it apart. That's okay with me. Like you're not going to hurt my feelings if you're like, this doesn't work at all. Like because as long as you give me a solution, as long as you're like, this doesn't work, but this is how we can fix it, that but I have a few ideas, but we're going to talk it out. Like that's just so valuable. And I find that when you find those people in the writing community, like it's very important to stick with them because, like I said, they want the best story possible.
yeah.
And so like I try to give feedback to people. I try take their feedback, especially with a spoonful of salt, really, because it's just very important.
Yeah, it's very hard really as well as a writer to do that, to almost give it away, so to speak. And then, because you're sitting there praying that, you come back with some really nice
I
feedback,
know.
that, they tell you how wonderful you are. But then, as you said quite rightly, the reality of it is, and it's nice to be able to give it away to a number of different people, because they will have different perspectives and different ideas, which will make the whole so much better, I think. But that takes a lot of courage, as a writer, particularly when you're new,
Mhm.
to actually release it, to let it go, to let it be out there. I think, a lot of writers have said they feel like they've got imposter syndrome. They don't feel like a writer, even though they've got a book out there, because, it's that fear of getting bad feedback. But then, as you said, and I think you're quite right, there's no such thing as bad feedback, really. It's just there to help you write better and create a better character, which is
Yeah,
fantastic. So where are your books available now? Your short stories and your novel?
yeah, they're available on Amazon and Barnes and Noble. If you go to my Instagram, I have links to like all my websites and where to find them. So yeah, they're pretty easy to find. You can just search my name and about everything that I've written
Yeah.
and it will pop up. So yeah.
That's great. Well, I listen, in the description, I will put links to your website, to Instagram, to everywhere, so people can connect with you. And of course, find out more, join your newsletter, and of course, buy your book, so you can sort of keep in touch with these people as well, which is great, because that's
Yeah.
always really nice, as a reader.
I'm trying to get better about sending newsletters.
Yeah, it's not an easy thing to do, because it's a different it's a different style, isn't it, really, when you're trying to write. It is quite hard to do. But I think, with people, I think as long as they for me, on my list, I just try to let people know where I am with the story and what I'm doing. And sometimes I'll ask for ideas, and I think that kind of works quite nicely. All right, so Moriah, listen, thank you so much for coming on today. As I said, I will leave links to everything in the description, so people can connect with you and buy your books, which is what we want them to do. So thank you so much for coming on today. It's been a pleasure speaking to you, and I wish you all the very best. And please let us know once your audiobooks come out, because
Yeah.
we want to know more about those. So thank you very much for coming today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us on another captivating episode of the Page Turnerz podcast. We hope you enjoyed delving into the pages with us, discovering new stories, and revisiting beloved classics. If you're as passionate about books as we are, don't forget to subscribe to our podcast and leave a review. Your feedback keeps us bringing you fascinating discussions, author interviews, and book recommendations. Remember, the adventure never ends when you have a book in hand. Until next time, keep turning those pages and let the magic of storytelling continue to inspire your imagination. Happy reading.